Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to this incredibly special day at St. Matthew's Church here in Hillsborough, North Carolina. Welcome to all of you who are here in person, and welcome to all who are joining us remotely. We have come together today to reflect on becoming beloved community in this parish, in this diocese, and in the Episcopal Church as a whole. And I am overjoyed and honored to have with us today former presiding bishop, retired, resting presiding bishop? Okay. Michael Curry, who for the past 8 years has been literally the apostle for becoming beloved community. Bishop Curry, you are no stranger to St. Matthew's. You called it your Bethany just now, your time away, your place of retreat. And I love that you came here, this place set aside for you. And you collaborated with then Rector Brooks Graebner on all things historical and otherwise, many things. And when I shared with the parish that you'd be joining us today, people just came up to tell me over and over again how much their lives have been touched by you. Dozens of us have been confirmed by you. So we need to be reconfirmed. We need some more juice. And I know that my sense of what preaching could be has been expanded just a little bit by you. I didn't know you could lean over the pulpit like that. Well, speaking of Rector Emeritus Brooks Graebner, it's also a joy and gift to have you here with us today, Brooks. You came to this parish in 1990, a small town parish, and built it up in 27 years of extraordinary ministry and care. And Brooks, as you all know, has a passion for all things historical and knows the story behind every little nook and cranny and tapestry and brick. You're like, what about this brick, Brooks? And you're like, yeah, well, that brick was done by 1942 by... It's fantastic. As the parish rector and diocesan historiographer, he has done so much to chronicle the obstacles and the setbacks and successes in God's work to draw us into beloved community. Now, the origins of this day go back to our parish's bicentennial celebrations, which we are doing for 3 years. Part of how we do things at St. Matthew's, you know? In 1824, the parish was organized by lay people. In 1826, the church itself was consecrated, and in between in 1825, roughly 200 years ago, the parish was recognized as a parish by the fledgling Episcopal Diocese of North Carolina. That's why we celebrated our lay organization in 2024, and while we'll celebrate our church buildings and memorials in 2026, this year in 2025, we wanted to explore the theme of parish and diocese and national church, and we thought we'd do it around the theme of beloved community. And that makes sense. Beloved community has been the hallmark of your tenure as presiding bishop. Thank you. And it's been the core of this parish's spiritual becoming or formation in the past 20 years, becoming a part of God's beloved community. More and more. More and more. More and more truth-telling. More and more justice. More and more reconciliation. More and more healing. Steps on the journey. So we find ourselves, brothers and sisters, in an extraordinary place today. We have Bishop Curry with us, we have Brooks Graebner with us, and we have you with us. We're here all together to reflect on becoming beloved community, which is about becoming who God has called us to be, and this journey that shaped us to the core. And the real star, though, the real hero of this day, whom we want to celebrate and be grateful for, this sounds very kind of, but it's God, who has acted so powerfully through the Holy Spirit and with Jesus of Nazareth. In your life, in Brooks's life, in my life, in our communal life. Like, look at what God has done with us. The Spirit changing our hearts so we can begin to imagine people in a better world connecting and loving and sharing a more just world. And Jesus Christ, who comes alongside the lost and the least so that the emergence of the kingdom of the beloved can start right there. Whew. This is great. This is fantastic that we are here. Part of my job in these remarks is to step back from my enthusiasm and to tell you about the day a little bit, though. So, we'll have this conversation around the period from 1967 to 2017 and wherever Brooks wishes to take us. Yes, right? And that's historical framing, after which I will talk with, I'll prompt Bishop Curry with questions about your experience and those times. And we have it like this. It's kind of like a TED Talk, right? It's kind of a TED conversation. And some flow back and forth in the conversation about beloved community, about racial reconciliation, the push towards gender equality with women's ordination, and then the recognition of LGBTQ with the consecration of Gene Robinson. All that's around God calling us into beloved community. We'll have a break after that for 20 minutes, and then we'll come back together in this church to reflect on 2017 to 2025, about the journey here at St. Matthew's, and what it was like as presiding bishop. A few things probably happened at that time about beloved community. Yeah, some things, all right. and then we'll have the youth group. Bishop Curry, our youth group's been on pilgrimage for 3 days now, exploring the heritage and the life of Pauli Murray. And Pauli Murray is the saint of beloved community, and they're going to be here en masse to pepper you with questions. And while I might be polite, like they're all between like 12 and 15. So you might want to get ready for that. After that, we have a picnic lunch, and then at 1:30 we gather for the Eucharist. And I know that whenever a couple of Episcopalians get together, we're like, oh, let's do Eucharist, right? We can't hardly help ourselves. But the Eucharist is the heart of everything we'll have discussed up to this point. It's the experience sacramentally of beloved community now as it will be in heaven. And when our forgiven dead rise up and the people that our ancestors enslaved rise with them in their glory, and we taste for a moment the New Jerusalem around the offering of Jesus at the altar. So please stay for the Eucharist. It is this initiation of beloved community. So in a moment, I'm going to turn over to Brooks to frame the day historically, but I wanted to do one last thing, which was to try to define or describe this term beloved community, because it means a lot, yeah, and it evokes a lot, but sometimes we can be a little bit fuzzy about what we actually mean by that. Did you know that the term beloved community arose in the early 20th century and 19th century in Josiah Royce in Harvard? It seems to have been about a spiritual and theological idea about a community engaged in conversation to discover universal truths and making meaning together. And then Martin Luther King, blessed Saint Martin Luther King, took Royce's idea and changed it into a social and political vision where all people could share in the abundance of this world, free from poverty and hate and hunger and racism. And we all know that King put unconditional love at the heart of that movement as both the end and the means. He understood that as one acted for the end of beloved community, one had to be loving every step of the way. Thus, compassion and nonviolent action right central to his movement. And in 2017, when Bishop Curry launched Becoming Beloved Community across the Episcopal Church, the vision was the same as King's. You can tell me if not. Yeah, there. Yet focused on truth-telling about racism in the church, engaging structural change in the church, and nurturing the disciplines that would ground all these efforts. And you know what? When you look at that sort of development of the idea of beloved community, it has meant all those things here at St. Matthew's. It certainly is a part of our deep and difficult engagement with our history, telling the truth where we have been afraid to tell that truth before, letting it really shake us. And beloved community at St. Matthew's is also centered on King's vision of a reconciled humanity, free from racism and oppression, and on King's insistence that only by walking in love can we walk towards love. Practicing Jesus is the way to Jesus. And the vision of beloved community at St. Matthew's has even shared in Josiah Royce's vision of a community given to a cause bigger than itself and engaging in searching and fearless and respectful dialogue. And there's only one thing more I'm going to add to these visions of beloved community. More and more in my time in this parish, it's become absolutely clear to me that beloved community is not something we make here at St. Matthew's among ourselves, but it's only accessible to us when we go down the hill to the rest of Hillsborough and collaborate and celebrate with the rest of the community. Yes, we have Eucharistic belovedness here, and we have great fellowship here, but where beloved community happens is not up here, but down the hill, in loving engagement with our non-Episcopal neighbors of all colors, stripes, varieties, and agendas. Just as Jesus poured himself out for us, we, the church, pours itself out and flows down the hill to where love himself, herself, meets us. But enough of this preaching. You know, I stand here and I can't help it. I'm like, you gotta preach. But I would like to invite us into a moment of prayer. The Lord be with you. And also with you. Let us pray. O God, you made us in your own image and redeemed us through Jesus, your Son. Look with compassion on the whole human family. Take away the arrogance and hatred which infect our hearts. Break down the walls that separate us. Unite us in bonds of love. And work through our struggle and confusion to accomplish your purposes on earth, that in your good time, all nations and races may serve you in harmony around your heavenly throne through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. And with that, I ask you to please welcome Rector Emeritus Brooks Graebner.
Bishop Curry, Robert, parishioners, and friends, I am grateful for the opportunity to share in this day with all of you and to provide a historical framework for appreciating the work of our church, our diocese, and our parish around becoming beloved community. Because we hold general conventions every 3 years, it's often useful to look at particular 3-year periods to chart our history. This morning, I'd like to offer snapshots of 3 such periods when our church turned its attention to matters of race. One crucial period began in 1865, when General Convention, in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War, authorized the church's Freedmen's Commission to address the needs of the newly emancipated. Our bishop at that time, Thomas Atkinson, was an enthusiastic supporter of the Freedmen's Commission, which led to the building of black schools and congregations in New Bern and Wilmington, and to the 1867 founding of St. Augustine's School in Raleigh. Another notable three-year period was launched in 1967, 99 years later, when the National Church, under presiding Bishop John Hines, launched a $9 million grant fund named the General Convention Special Program. This marked our church's ambitious effort to address the racial inequities and injustices that had led to the urban riots of the 1960s and the rise of the Black Power movement. The special program would operate through awarding grants directly to projects undertaken by inner city residents themselves and not by some agency. In early 1968, our diocesan convention embraced this new national initiative and passed a resolution naming the urban crisis as our chief diocesan priority. Our bishop, Thomas Frazier, was eager to see the convention's resolution implemented. Diocesan Council proceeded by designating St. Titus in Durham as an urban ministry center and asking its priest, Father Nate Porter, to serve as director of our urban crisis program. The idea was to use St. Titus as a model and a training center. But the work envisioned for St. Titus was soon eclipsed by another Durham-based program, the Malcolm X Liberation University. The Malcolm X University grew out of efforts by a community organizer named Howard Fuller to help black students at Duke pressure the administration and faculty into creating a robust program of African studies. The pressure tactics included a temporary takeover of Allen Building. When these efforts proved unsuccessful, Fuller suggested that blacks in Durham should start their own school. Hoping to get underway in the fall of 1969, Fuller applied for and received a $15,000 emergency grant through that special program fund. Father Porter gave his stamp of approval, as did Bishop Frazier. That was July 1969. In September, the special program office authorized a second, larger grant. But when that grant was publicly announced and word got out, both on WRAL-TV and in the local press, the firestorm of criticism was swift and severe. On October 20th, Frazier sent a statement to the clergy and wardens of the diocese. He reviewed the steps by which Father Porter and the Urban Crisis Committee came to support the grant, and he announced that Council would be holding a special meeting on October 31st. Should clergy, vestries, and congregations wish to express either support or dissent, he invited them to let him or council members know. The next 10 days witnessed a veritable stampede by vestries, clergy, and lay people to go on record. Many were incensed and saw the Malcolm X University grant as clinching proof that our church had gone off the rails. Frequently, their letters were accompanied with declarations that the diocese and national church would get no more of their money. Our parish fell squarely into that camp. The vestry met on October 20th, and the minutes state, and I quote, "After much discussion, a motion was made that the clerk write a letter to Bishop Frazier in protest of what our money is being used for, and we would withhold all money from the diocese until we heard from him, the bishop." Second voted and approved. When the diocese gathered for the 1970 convention, delegates faced a $165,000 budget shortfall. The cumulative impact of congregations like ours who made good on their threat to withhold funds in protest of the Malcolm X University grant. As for convention itself, the debates were contentious, but the diocese did not pull apart. Bishop Frazier weighed in against the practice of restrictive pledging, and 1971 saw parishes that withheld funds the previous year return to the fold. Although the diocese continued work in the areas of poverty and race into the early 1970s, no longer was this considered the chief priority. After 1973, programs to address racism and aid Black communities became just one social concern among many. Here in this diocese, we entered what I call the era of Christian social ministries. Under the leadership of Director Lex Matthews, parishes were encouraged to launch a wide range of programs for ameliorating the conditions of the poor and underserved. Affordable housing, access to medical services, early childhood education, soup kitchens, clothing ministries. Many of these programs and services from the 1970s and 80s are still going strong today. We highlighted one of them at our most recent Diocesan History Day, the Episcopal Farm Worker Ministry in Newton Grove. Now, I want to fast forward to another 3-year period which begins in 2006. Once again, this marks a time when General Convention took steps to address issues of race in church and society. At this point, Bishop Curry had been our bishop for 6 years, and I had been rector of St. Matthew's for 16 years. But issues of race and racism had not been the primary focus in the preceding 3 years. As a church, we were chiefly preoccupied with the aftermath of the 2003 consecration of Gene Robinson, the first openly gay bishop. In March 2006, however, the House of Bishops issued a pastoral letter entitled "The Sin of Racism, a Call to Covenant." And in June, the General Convention passed a resolution numbered A-123, calling on our church to document complicity in the institution of slavery and for every diocese to report detailed information at General Convention 3 years later in 2009. Moreover, the resolution called on the church at both the national and the diocesan level to hold a day of repentance and formal apology for that complicity with racism. In the aftermath of these developments, Bishop Curry and our assisting bishop, Chip Marble, took several actions. In July, Bishop Curry issued the clergy a September deadline for reading the pastoral letter on the sin of racism to their congregations. In November, Bishop Marble and the Anti-Racism Committee asked us here at St. Matthew's to be a pilot congregation in a new program entitled Companion in Mission. The goal of this program was for a historically white parish to undertake a mission project with a neighboring congregation of a different race or ethnicity. We embraced that opportunity by inviting Dickerson Chapel to join us in helping to build a Habitat house in Fairview. At the January 2007 convention, 2 pivotal events transpired. Bishop Curry appointed me diocesan historiographer. Changed my life, it really did. And we adopted a resolution calling for us in North Carolina to join in implementing Resolution A-123. So just like we did in 1968, the diocese followed up on a national church initiative, and we passed our own resolution saying, we are on board with this. I took this resolution as a mandate to start compiling a racial history of our diocese, beginning with our own parish. The very next month, our newly consecrated presiding bishop, Catherine Jeffords Shorey, came to the Chapel of the Cross to celebrate and preach at a 30th anniversary observance of Polly Murray's first Eucharistic celebration in 1977. I was privileged to be a member of the altar party along with Bishop Curry, and I was tasked with writing an account of the event for the historiographer newsletter. This started me thinking about what a truly remarkable witness Pauli Murray represented for our church, and especially for this emerging challenge to engage our racial history forthrightly. Because that's actually what Proud Shoes is all about. Meanwhile, our own Sally Green was very much involved in doing just that, and in November of 2007, she organized a symposium at UNC devoted to Thomas Ruffin's legal opinion in State v. Mann. 2008 was the year set aside for responding to Resolution A-123. It started with my traveling to Natchez to deliver a paper on our diocesan racial history as the appropriate precursor to the racial history of the Diocese of Mississippi, since the first bishop of Mississippi was the first rector of our parish, William Mercer Green. So the story of William Mercer Green really begins here, but it continues in Mississippi. In September, we held our own day-long event in response to A-123. This occurred right here at St. Matthew's and was entitled Traces of Our Trade, Church and Slavery in North Carolina. The event was jointly sponsored by the historiographer, the School of Ministry, and the Anti-Racism Committee. The morning program included showing the movie Traces of the Trade, followed by a discussion moderated by members of the DeWolf family, whose ancestors' complicity with the slave trade and whose prominence in the Episcopal Church of Rhode Island formed the basis for the film. The afternoon session featured presentations on the racial history of our own diocese. Sally Green, Lynn Hoke, Kim Lucas, now Bishop of Colorado, and I were among the presenters. Bishop Marble and Bishop Curry made the opening and closing remarks. 130 people were in attendance. Early the next month, the National Church held its Day of Repentance, where Bishop Marble shared stories of what the dioceses of Mississippi and North Carolina had done to respond to Resolution A-123. So how did these initial steps taken in 2007 and 2008 impel further action? In January of 2009, Bishop Curry offered a stirring convention address entitled, All Are Welcome. And we passed a resolution commending the addition of Pauli Murray to the calendar of saints. In March, we launched the Pauli Murray Project, and in July, the Durham Convocation hosted the first Pauli Murray commemorative service at St. Titus. This was in furtherance of the goal of adding Pauli Murray to the calendar of saints, since one of the criteria for sainthood in the Episcopal Church is local commemoration. That same summer, we formalized our sister church relationship with Dickerson Chapel and instituted the practice of worshiping together on Fifth Sundays. Two things are evident as I look back on these last two periods. In 1967, national church initiatives around racial equity and justice were ambitious and well-intentioned, but they were not fully embraced by the diocese and the parish. Certainly our parish repudiated what the national church was trying to do through the special program grant. 39 years later, in 2006, the attitude and alignment were markedly different. This time, the diocesan and national church initiatives found receptive ground, not only in my own ministry as historiographer, but also here in our parish. And it hasn't stopped there. The alignment of national church, diocese, and parish around the surpassing need for racial truth-telling and reconciliation and the building of beloved community has only deepened during the time that Bishop Curry has served as our presiding bishop and Robert has succeeded me as rector of this parish. Thank you.
Thank you, Brooks. And we have some time now for questions and reflections, which I will offer some prompts to Bishop Curry.
Okay.
Yep. And but Brooks, before we even get there, I have just a question from your presentation. You mentioned that in the 70s there was, in the late 60s there was all this direct concern about racial reconciliation, and then the social ministries that developed in the 70s was like an array of concerns, as you listed, those affordable housing and so on and so on. And I'm wondering if there's any sense, if you know if there's any sense at that time, if it was sort of, it got too hot as the church faced directly into race relations, so they kind of backed off and softened it more broadly. Was there a sense of that at the time? Or can you speak to that?
The short answer to that question is yes.
Okay.
The slightly longer answer to that question is that the big push became to center social ministry in the life of the parish.
Uh-huh.
So, you know, the General Convention Special Program was very much a top-down thing. Lex Matthews was amazing at his ability to encourage individual parishes to adopt programs and support them. So Church of the Good Shepherd started a soup kitchen, and St. Peter's, where I served in Charlotte, started a soup kitchen. We started the Episcopal Farm Workers Ministry. But, you know, one of the things that I think was trying to be addressed is let's build social ministry from the ground up, and let's find programs that directly impact those local communities where our congregations are located. And if I might, I just would turn to Bishop Curry, who was involved at St. Stephen's, Winston-Salem, in exactly those kinds of programs.
Yeah, I think Lex was a genius at how do you actually enable people to be engaged in the kind of ministry that they might not otherwise be engaged in, and then to think about what does this mean. I remember Lex we were at a conference, APSO. I was trying to remember what it was. Mm-hmm. We were somewhere, I don't remember where we were now, but anyway, we were somewhere in West Virginia.
Okay.
And I remember talking with Lex, and he said, what you have to do is you can't expect anybody to commit themselves to something that they have absolutely no relationship to. He said, why would you expect that? You can't, people don't, none of us functions that way. He says, you have to enable folk to actually be involved in the lives of other people in a different context. And then they'll begin to ask some questions. They'll begin to think about, okay, how are we most helpful? How do we join in partnership? And then people may ask, well, why is there a concentration of poverty in this community and not in others? But that's much more authentic. That's actually, he didn't use the word, but I think a theological word for it is, God figured this out a long time ago. It's called incarnation. After a while, you just got to go down yourself and be a part of the community, right? And Merry Christmas. I mean, that's what's really going on. I mean, that's the genius of Christmas. I've got to become part of this world in order to help to reshape it and help others to experience it. And I think Lex was a genius at that and way ahead of his time. And I remember, I can't remember, oh gosh, now I'm going to get in trouble because I can't even remember, fortunately, I can't remember the person's name, who was a big supporter of Jesse Helms and also an Episcopalian, who became a big supporter of the soup kitchen. I believe it was the one at Good Shepherd in Raleigh. I can't remember for sure, but I believe it was. Now, I don't know that his politics completely changed. I have no idea, except that he became a big supporter of that ministry there because he got to meet people who were in a particular need and had a compassionate heart and responded. And that's what Lex said over and over again. If you don't, what he also used to say is, if you don't sit down with somebody and drink bourbon with them, You'll never change their heart. That was Lex. But it was very much a different way of engaging Christian social ministries and engaging difficult and tough issues that we might not be able to have conversations about if you just throw it at somebody. Instead of, one, getting to know them, two, being involved with them in the issues and concerns you're talking about, and then three, see where do we go from here.
That and all of that gets really at the heart of the idea of what we're talking about today. You have the national church attempting to respond nationally, and there's a role for that, right? The bishops in 1967 and the special program, and then that kind of trickles down to the diocese. But there is that need for the visionary leadership that organizes a whole church, or that can disseminate across a church. But then without grassroots engagement, it feels like something imposed, where you either have to choose to be righteous to accept it, or be righteous by rejecting it. And then that creates the polarization that is so often seen today.
Yep.
And I don't know if, how, this is completely off my list of questions, no surprise.
Oh.
So how did you think about that as presiding bishop? Because then you're, yes, like Lex Matthews, and open up these grassroots engagements and the changing of hearts because of relationship. Mm-hmm. But then you're also in charge of, but you're the presiding bishop of the House of Bishops. So how do you see that role of that national leadership, diocese, local churches?
You've got to get all of them talking together. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it was, I have to admit, one of the most challenging opportunities, that's a nice way to say it, was to constantly, for me as presiding bishop, was to constantly remind the national or church-wide structures, which are, they're international as well, but have a tendency to be East Coast and West Coast structures. Mm-hmm. And to think in terms of East Coast and West Coast. And I often said, there's a whole big Episcopal church in the South and in the Midwest. And this is not a conversation just between New York and LA. And if you don't believe me, look at the budget, see where the money's coming from. But anyway, that's whole. We can be very pragmatic about it. And to get those in conversation, which are often very different conversations. I remember at one general convention, I don't remember what year it was, we were doing something, we were working on Beloved Community, and I asked the Bishop of Iowa and the folk in Iowa to be one of the presenters at general convention at a joint session of both houses and everyone. And I remember a number of people saying, Iowa? Why are we, anything good come out of Iowa? They were, and what folk discovered, I had been there and had been involved, the people in Iowa, the Episcopal Church in Iowa, they have been doing some remarkable work, engagement with race and racism, not just in terms of black and white, but indigenous, and they've been doing it, nobody knew it. And for them to present, that was the thing that opened up. Oh, Beloved Community, this is something serious, and it really does engage where we are and who we are. That's sort of the difference where, on the one hand, that's one thing I learned from Lex. Help folk engage in let them engage. Then ask the questions and have the discussions, but don't impose the discussions on. You've got to help everybody come along. It's sort of like, I never forget when my daddy had decided that he wanted to be cremated when he died. So, he died, and so, so we were following what he had said he wanted to do. Well, he never told his sisters about that. Classic family stuff. But anyway, that's a whole nother, because he was the younger brother, and he didn't want to go through Well, I had to tell him. And I'll never forget, my Aunt Lily said, they're going to burn up, brother? Oh, Lord Jesus, they're going to burn him up. I said, now look, y'all believe in Jesus? Yeah, we believe in Jesus. And y'all believe in the resurrection? Yeah, we believe in the resurrection. Well, God can do whatever God has with ashes or with flesh. Now, let's go off. So then after this is a side note, but after we had, did everything and had the service and all that, everybody said, well, can I get some of his ashes? And all his sisters, so there's a little bit of daddy everywhere. I don't know where he's all over the place. But you got to let folk sink their teeth in it and live in it. None of us likes to have things imposed on us. It's very difficult. Now, there are times when you have to drag us along kicking and screaming. You have to just do what's right and do it, but you got to do it in ways that are loving, that really do seek to bring folk along. And that's where Lex Matthews was an absolute genius. It wasn't just that he was being strategic. It was his heart. Anyway, that's, I forgot what your question was, but that was, whatever. When I was in college, I read a book called Search for the Beloved Community, and it was by two scholars, Ken Smith, and I can't remember the other guy's name. Anyway, it was a book about the theology of Martin Luther King, but the title, Search for the Beloved Community, that's the first time I heard the phrase beloved community. That would have been 1974 or somewhere thereabouts. The phrase wasn't beloved community. It didn't catch fire until after King's death. He had used it. He had talked about it, but it didn't catch, for whatever reason, it didn't catch fire. It was after his death that the phrasing of beloved community became an image for what he was talking about, and actually for what the New Testament's talking about when it talks about the kingdom or the reign of God. That's really what it's called. Thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. Anyway, so I wasn't really conscious of it in those words. What I can say, though, is that I was conscious of the hope and the dream for that kind of community as a hope and a dream for, in those times, I was just thinking in terms of the United States, in terms of America. But certainly for the whole world, for the whole human family. That's what's really at stake. And that if we don't get it right in the local community, we're never going to get it right that's just the reality. But if we can get a little bit here and a little bit there, like Desmond Tutu used to say, all we need is everybody to bring their goods to the table. And we put your good and my good and everybody's good together, we're going to get some good. It's not complex. Hard to do, but not complex. And so I can't say that I was really thinking about it in terms of beloved community and global transformation and all that kind of stuff in 1978. Right. And I was still trying to figure out how do you celebrate the Eucharist. Fingers, hands, what goes where. I do remember, though, as I said, Lex was a significant influence. And the years that I had here as a young priest were significant. With a diocese that was really still struggling with healing. There was really, Bishop Frazier and then Bishop Estill, they had to do some real healing work with congregations. And I honestly do suspect that in 2003, if you want to jump quickly, 2003, some of the turmoil that rose up again around the election of Bishop Robinson, and then my giving consent, the General Convention giving consent, and then his consecration that fall. Some of that was, again, the sense of top-down imposing something on us who have to live with it here. Now, one of our clergy, I can't remember who it was now, said, well, the real thing that happened was that Episcopalians got to the supermarket. They really weren't paying attention to what you all were doing in Minneapolis. But the average Episcopalian in North Carolina got to the supermarket and looked on Star Magazine and National Enquirer and saw the Episcopal Church. And they were not thrilled with that. I think that, above sexuality, and they didn't get to there at all. A similar kind of thing happened in 2003, 2004, and to some extent 5, in terms of churches holding money back. Churches held money back in those years, and we had to trim and cut the budgets and all that kind of stuff and do those kinds of things, and yet we stayed in conversation. We kept everybody, that was the goal, keep everybody in conversation. Don't give up on anybody. But I do think there was a sense for many people that something got imposed on them, that they weren't brought along, what Lex Matthews talked about. Now, whether it was possible to do that, I don't know. I really don't know. But we stayed in relationship. We took Rabbi Friedman and those learnings seriously. Do not cut people off. Stay in relationship with them. Stay in conversation. Listen to them because they're saying something, even if you disagree with them. And we did that. And I remember having meetings around the diocese and in the different areas. It wasn't just convocations, but in the different areas. And they were hot meetings. I mean, they were. I kind of want to say, let's like roast the pig for the pig picking. Let's roast the bishop for the pig picking. I mean, it's like I said, I guess I'm the pig anyway. I mean, it really got hot. Well, by time I think we started in Raleigh, and then we went to Greensboro, and then we got to Charlotte. And it had been, oh God, it had been so hot in the meetings. But the good thing was we didn't run away from the conversation. You stay in conversation. That's what you do with your family. And by the time we got to Charlotte, word had gotten out that it had really gotten hot. Well, the LGBTQ community came out in droves in Charlotte. I said, y'all don't know how happy I am to see you. I'm sorry, you have no idea. But in time, you stay in it. The money was cut off. I mean, we lost significant parts of the diocesan budget. And then other churches stepped up. But, we walked through that and made tough decisions. And, you keep going and you keep going forward and you stay in relationship. And yet you continue to try to do what you pray is the right thing to do. But you do it that's king. You do it in ways that are loving. You can disagree with me, but we're going to love each other. We're going to do our best. I mean, even if we don't like each other, we're going to love each other. Loving and liking are not the same thing. Right? And so we're going to keep doing that. And in time, most of us, and I think of myself, I can move, I can grow, and I figure if Michael can grow, then it must be possible for anybody to grow. And if we all can, then we grow closer to each other, even if we never agree. Amen. Even if we never agree. And that was true even on the church-wide level. I don't want to get into that yet, I guess. But that learning was important on the church-wide level to remember there's a world out there beside New York and LA.
Iowa.
Yes.
There is Wisconsin. Right?
And there is on Wisconsin, right.
And this is a last comment before we kind of open the mic up for the folks in the pews today. I'm just really struck by how we're all talking about this church process, that we're an Episcopal church, which means we're not just this congregation, right? We're connected to bishops who are then connected to each other, who are connected to even more bishops out there in the Anglican communion. And this, how God works, like how God does God's stuff in this relationship between the local community and even when you've talked about how people don't like having things imposed on them, and yet it seems to be part of the process of God's working is the dropping in of irritants into even the diocese or I don't want to read this pastoral letter from the bishop, that kind of thing. And yet that kind of input and the pushback And then the engaging in relationships seems, but I think you're saying that's how God does God's stuff with us.
Yeah.
As a church.
Yeah. With people, with just.
That it doesn't work just for us to pull out into pure locality, but and to abandon the larger communion.
Right. We need each other. Even when we irritate each other. I mean, the reality, anybody here is a member of a family. Think about families and the relationships in families. We do need each other. We are family with each other, but we also drive each other crazy. That's called being human. It's been like that since the Garden of Eden, so to speak. I mean, it's just part of the mix. It's part of the social mix. And, Dr. King, toward the end of his life, over and over again said, we will either learn to live together as brothers and sisters, or we will perish together as fools. The choice is ours, chaos or community. That's where he was actually invoking that beloved community. There. It was coming out in a negative, actually, but that's where he invoked it most consistently. And I think that's the human experiment. Ultimately, I think it's the national experiment, e pluribus unum, but I think it's the human experiment. And gosh, if we can't do it as followers of Jesus, why would we expect anybody else? But I believe we can, and we have actually.
Yeah.
I mean, we have. Not perfect, but there's been progress. There actually has. I can think of churches that were, not St. Matthew's, but I mean, that were profoundly opposed to, I mean, at one point we weren't even talking about same-sex marriage yet. I mean, that took a while. But were really, I remember one meeting with one vestry in particular who said, we don't want to have any blessings, is what we were talking at that point, not so much same-sex weddings. And I said, well, I'm not going to, first of all, I can't force you anyway. But that's not the intent here. The intent is to create the possibility where that ministry is needed, and to create space for those. They said, you're not going to make us do it? I said, you think more highly of me than I think of myself. I know I don't. I can't make you, but I'm not, even if I could, I wouldn't. That's not how we treat each other. Mm-hmm. That's not how we do it. And they said, would you be willing to put that in writing? I said, well, I said it, sure. Man, I was winging it at that point. But anyway, I said, but yeah, but it was, I said, we're sure. And so we did, and there was a letter that was sent out to all the guys, the wardens and treasurers and rectors and vicars. And we sent it out so that everybody heard that same message. That church now does same-sex marriages. Mm-hmm. Now, how many years are we talking about later? 22 years later. Again, I do think that we can actually, if we care about each other, even when it's the most difficult to care about each other, we can find our way through, we can march through hell for a heavenly cause if we have to. I really believe that, because I've seen it happen here in North Carolina. I've seen it.
Thank you. You've been a big part of that.
Well,
helping that God.
One of many, believe me, one of many.
So, questions from the crowd, from the group, from you all, from this parish. We're going to talk more about the period from 2017 to 2025 in the later session. I will summarize your question for the sake of people on Zoom. Horace Johnson.
Good to be here again. My question is related to religion itself. I was born in 54 and integrated the school system here in 66 when I was 10. Brought up with Baptist in Mount Bright. And up until that point, I thought everybody was a Baptist in the world. That's all religion is.
It's true.
So, to my horror, when I got to integrate the school system, I was the first black kid there, and they proposed to me to decide whether I would be called the N-word, the GGR, or prefer the GGRA. As I traveled through the world, I became confused with religion, because everybody believes that their religion is the right one. The thing that I saw happening is, even if they were the right one, how do they segregate the human race? How do you segregate human beings? And over my travels, I've come to understand that it takes what you call hitting rock bottom to understand that we're all the same, like you said, because I did a tour of duty to Duke with the transplant team. And I met some gentlemen out of Tennessee and Kentucky who were devout. They said they were brought up devout racists. But what made them even was the fact that they needed a kid, along something that had to come from some human being. So I kind of come to show us was when you got to the point where if the doctor comes in and says, I have a donor for what you need, you're not going to be asking whether he's Asian, African American, or Native Indigenous, are you? Because on the inside, we're all the same. So I'm trying to understand how your travel, your journey, how difficult it was. Because I wondered if St. Matthew's was here in 66, and they reached out to Dickinson Chapel. That was the best kept secret ever. And I wondered if the news media had anything to do with it, because sometimes you have more power with silence than you do getting loud. I just wondered how your travel affected you, because it's definitely affected me, but I've come to understand, my understanding of behind authority is that he took me to a grain of salt, a grain of sand, and then he took me to space, and that's how big I was in his heart. I was an individual. And he said, I'm not going to ask you what denomination you are. I'm just going to ask you, what have you done to preserve my words? So I think if you can read, interpret words for yourself, you get an understanding of what he wants you to do. So I was curious as to how do we blend this now? How do we get everybody to understand we're not out to hurt each other? We need each other more now than ever.
So, yeah, thank you, Horace. So for the people on Zoom, just the question is, it's a varied and complex question, but thank you. But it's partly about like how religion connects us to God, but also tends to separate us. And then how your very moving comment that we discover our need for each other only when we hit rock bottom, and that we absolutely need, like in the case of an organ transplant, how we need one another. And we discover that need and relate more fully. And the question was to you, Bishop Curry, about all of that and about your travels and your sense of like how, I guess I would put it towards like how religion can separate, but then also unite, and then the hitting rock bottom thing, which is very powerful.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is religion can separate, but it can also unite in some profound ways. But it takes human beings to do that. And to figure out what are these faiths really about, and what really matters. The end of the day, anybody who's hit rock bottom knows when you hit rock bottom, you got decisions to make.
But I know that in Hillsborough we have many denominations, and part of what we'll talk about when we come back in the second session is how going through and into our racial history in this parish opened our hearts to all the pain of slavery and enslavement and all of that. And that was like a big rock bottom for us that then made it almost like compulsively necessary to reach out our hands to engage with the other denominations.
Sure.
And like the discovery, that's what I meant by going down the hill. Like that we can't just have a beloved community isolated in ourselves, that our own history has such brokenness in it. Encountering that means we have to re-engage with the historically black community in this town and so forth.
Yeah, we're struggling with that. I mean, as a nation, just the U.S. I'm not even dealing with the rest of the world. But as a nation, precisely what you were talking about, the realities, some of which are part of our past, and some of it's part of our racial past. But, as presiding bishop, one of the real profound discoveries for me was to realize the plight of indigenous people, Native American people in this country. And the trails of tears and the extreme levels of poverty. I mean, and my visits weren't always, you'd have to, when you go to Navajo land, as an example, which is the Episcopal, it's a diocese, basically, which encompasses parts of Utah, parts of Colorado, parts of Arizona, and it's basically on the Navajo reservation, where that territory, the levels of poverty and the struggles of people to survive, and yet the human dignity that really is there. That was something I had not been exposed to prior. And I saw parts of our history that I was vaguely aware of, how it had impacted the lives of the Navajo people. And yet, people who are, for the most part, profoundly Christian, deeply faithful, just kind, struggling people. And during the pandemic, I tried my best to stay in touch with them. And the bishops in those areas stayed in touch, but when we couldn't travel, realizing that what may have been really bad for the rest of us, for them was hell. Was that they were actually going through hell on earth. Because of the lack of medical services that were there before the pandemic, and the health crisis. Well, to be aware of that, and then to figure out how do we, as a church, help to make a difference there, that's what you do. And that's what we can do when we are aware of it. And our church is doing some things. I think it's doing some things, and I hope they'll continue to make a difference. But that only happens when you kind of hit rock bottom and realize, oh my gosh, I didn't know. And we can do something. Doing nothing is not an option, but doing something. We can't do everything, but we can do something. And to do that. And that's true, that is true around race. I just commend St. Matthew's. I remember what you all were doing here in the community, but it's hard to get that known. God bless the news media. I'm not criticizing the news media. But it's kind of like, if there's not a 5-alarm fire, nobody's interested in seeing it. But if every once in a while, I remember they used to have good news stories on the news stations. That's when everybody went in the kitchen and got something to eat. It was, but the truth is, if we all dig in and figure out how can we make it better, we can't do everything, but we can do something. And if we do that, and that's where Desmond Tutu was saying, if we do our little bit, whatever it is, we can actually make a difference. We do not have to be victims of fate unless we do nothing. And we can make it, and we can do it together. And so I think that's one of the things I have seen traveling around the world. I have to admit that I've seen parts of the world I don't want to go back to again. I would do it, but I don't necessarily want to go back to it again. And I've seen parts of the world that make me realize how blessed we are to live here. For all of our issues, and Lord knows we got issues, but for all of our issues, I realize how privileged we are to have freedoms that we have such as they are. And that if we don't use them, leverage them for the good, then woe upon us. And we can. So thank you all.
Thank you. And I think we can come back to the question about the future and the doing the small goods. I'm really fascinated with the next step for St. Matthew's, perhaps around indigenous communities, and which is also very rich and alive here, and the beloved community in that context and what that might be. But all that has to wait And we're going to have our youth here to tilt especially towards the future in the second conversation. Right now, there is a break until around 11:35. We'll extend that a little bit, so a break till 11:35. And when we come back, the youth are going to be en masse in these pews. So those of you who are in these pews, you could even come up to the choir, you could, whatever, but the youth will be here. So a 15-minute break. I'll see you back here at 11:35. Thank you.
What time is it? I forgot to bring my water. What time is it? Oh.
Beloved community, isolated in ourselves, that our own history has such brokenness in it. Encountering that means we have to re-engage with the historically black community in this town and so forth.
Yeah, we're struggling with that. I mean, as a nation, just the U.S. I'm not even dealing with the rest of the world. But as a nation, precisely what you were talking about, the realities, some of which are part of our past, and some of it's part of our racial past. But, as presiding bishop, one of the real profound discoveries for me was to realize the plight of indigenous people, Native American people in this country. And the trails of tears and the extreme levels of poverty. I mean, and my visits weren't always, when you go to Navajo land, as an example, which is the Episcopal, it's a diocese, basically, which encompasses parts of Utah, parts of Colorado, parts of Arizona, and it's basically on the Navajo reservation, where that territory, the levels of poverty and the struggles of people to survive, and yet the human dignity that really is there. I mean, that was something I had not been exposed to prior. And I saw parts of our history that I was vaguely aware of, how it had impacted the lives of the Navajo people. And yet, people who are, for the most part, profoundly Christian, deeply faithful, just kind, struggling people. And during the pandemic, I tried my best to stay in touch with them. And the bishops in those areas stayed in touch. But when we couldn't travel, realizing that what may have been really bad for the rest of us, for them was hell. Was that they were actually going through hell on earth. Because of the lack of medical services that were there before the pandemic, and the health crisis. Well, to be aware of that, and then to figure out how do we, as a church, help to make a difference there, that's what you do. And that's what we can do when we are aware of it. And our church is doing some things. I think it's doing some things, and I hope they'll continue to make a difference. But that only happens when you kind of hit rock bottom and realize, oh my gosh, I didn't know. And we can do something. Doing nothing is not an option, but doing something. We can't do everything, but we can do something. And to do that. And that's true, that is true around race. I just commend St. Matthew's. I remember what you all were doing here in the community, but it's hard to get that known. God bless the news media. I'm not criticizing the news media. But it's kind of like, if there's not a 5-alarm fire, nobody's interested in seeing it. But if every once in a while, I remember they used to have good news stories on the news stations. That's when everybody went in the kitchen and got something to eat. It was, but the truth is, if we all dig in and figure out how can we make it better, we can't do everything, but we can do something. And if we do that, and that's where Desmond Tutu was saying, if we do our little bit, whatever it is, we can actually make a difference. We do not have to be victims of fate unless we do nothing. And we can make it, and we can do it together. And so I think that's one of the things I have seen traveling around the world, I have to admit that I've seen parts of the world I don't want to go back to again. I mean, I would do it, but I don't necessarily want to go back to it again. And I've seen parts of the world that make me realize how blessed we are to live here. For all of our issues, and Lord knows we got issues, but for all of our issues, I realize how privileged we are to have freedoms that we have such as they are. And that if we don't use them, leverage them for the good, then woe upon us. And we can. So thank you all.
Thank you. And I think we can come back to the question about the future and the doing the small goods. I'm really fascinated with the next step for St. Matthew's, perhaps around indigenous communities, and which is also very rich and alive here, and the beloved community in that context and what that might be. But all that has to wait, and we're going to have our youth here to tilt especially towards the future in the second conversation. Right now, there is a break until around 11:35. We'll extend that a little bit, so a break till 11:35. And when we come back, the youth are going to be en masse in these pews. So those of you who are in these pews, you could even come up to the choir, you could whatever, but the youth will be here. So a 15-minute break. I'll see you back here at 11:35. Thank you.